if you've read the bio, then you know who I am. And thanks for Debbie for inviting me to speak tonight for everybody who's joining. So it's really a pleasure to be asked to talk about two of my favorite things, paddling in general and the Northern Forest Canoe Trail specifically. Throughout this presentation, just for abbreviation purposes, I will just call it the trail or NFCT, because it's too much of a mouthful to say Northern Forest Canoe Trail over and over and over. So I'm going to start with a quick disclosure. I was introduced to the trail by a really good paddling friend of mine over here on the west side of Michigan, Mr. Mac Truax. He'd completed the trail already 3 times, and he started encouraging me to join him for his 4th attempt. So that's how it all started for me. So I'm going to jump in with some color about the trail as seen through my personal experiences. First of all, there's a reason why it's called, as you can see on the slide in front of you, the Appalachian Trail of Water Trails. It's the longest mapped water trail, paddling trail in the nation. So with that comes a whole bunch of facts. So on this slide, which I won't bother reading all those facts to you, you can probably see them clearly, and you can get all that information out on the NFCT website. It's very robust. It has interactive tool for if you plan on doing section paddling or any adventure you want. It's very impressive. So I'll admit that after I went out on the website, after talking to Mac and then going out on the website, these facts were what really enticed me to go forward. So beginning with the length, 740 miles. Wow. My limits would be pushed further than they ever had before. The most I paddled was 153 miles, the Manistee, and then I also do the Campus to Coast every year, and that's about 157 miles, but that's more of an endurance thing. So it's keeping and thinking of doing a 30-day trip where I'd average 25 miles per day without any 0 days. I wasn't sure I could sustain myself, but it sounded so intriguing. So we planned on doing it in 30 days. The average person through paddler does it in 40 days. My friend Mac has done it in as little as 25 days. That's when he's all alone and he's just pushing himself 45 miles a day. I didn't want to be that aggressive. So besides the impressive mileage, I was really impressed with the terrain. As you can see, it goes through 4 states and up into Canada. You're talking upstate New York, farmlands of Vermont and New Hampshire, and then all through the wilderness of Maine. Very impressive geography. Basically, you're seeing dense wilderness everywhere, glacier boulders, mountain ranges, the Green Mountains, Mount Katahdin. You actually have in sight on some of the rivers and lakes, some of the Appalachian Trail mountains. So I never tired of the geography around the curve. And again, that's something that really enticed me to do this. Literally every bend, there was something new. So in addition to all of that, the geography, I also love wilderness camping. I don't sleep any better than I ever sleep in my tent. So there would be a lot of wilderness camping, but there would be just enough opportunity to get off the trail and check in with those 45 different trail communities. So being somebody that had only lived out of my boat for 7 days, I kind of couldn't figure out how I was going to go 30 days without doing laundry or getting a hot shower and all that kind of stuff. So we pulled into the towns just often enough, either to shuttle our cars or to, a lot of times you're just pulling your boats right through the towns anyways. So that gave us time to charge up our devices. Sometimes we get a room somewhere. We'd always check in with the locals for weather and trail updates. They were very good about, giving that information out. And we, of course, would stop and eat a fresh meal or 2 or 3, or as much as we could cram in ourselves because you were always hungry. So needless to say, the people in those small towns were incredible. It's kind of like going to the UP. Just everybody wants to help you out. Trail angels everywhere. offering you bottles of water and helping you fix things that broke down. Incredible people. So that's all the things that where I was enticed about, and I sort of paid attention to as I reviewed the website. But what I didn't pay attention to, and you can throw up the next slide, Debbie, or I can try and throw it up if you want. Okay. I didn't really pay attention to that picture. I put that together myself. Elevation. All those northeastern mountains and those deep lakes were carved out by massive glaciers millions of years ago, just like the Great Lakes of Michigan, probably the same glaciers. So this slide shows you a snapshot of the elevation along the whole trail, going from the western terminus on your left-hand side there all the way to the eastern terminus. So the trail averages around 1,000 feet, with the highest peak at slightly over 1,800, and you can see that right there above the Saranac Locks that's in blue on the left. And then the lowest at 100 feet, where it drops down to Lake Champlain in Vermont, and that's at the very bottom there. So that huge drop happens in just the first 150 miles. And for those of you who obviously understand geography, if you're all outdoor people, you know that each one of those little spikes and dips, you're doing a lot of pulling, pushing, lining, tracking, and some very technical paddling. So you're doing all that while you're managing the navigational and weather challenges that come with that diverse geography and that varied elevation. I never had any idea. I mean, Lake Superior, I paddled several times and I know how quickly the wind can kick up. But when you've got a lake like Lake Superior with mountains all the way around it and the winds kick up, you're in trouble, real trouble. So I learned a lot about navigating and the effects of geography and elevation on navigation. I literally could write a book about it. So some of the navigations you have to do, I think you see that Saranac locks up there. There's 2 sets of locks you have to go through as you're dropping down towards Lake Champlain. One of those you actually do manually. You do it by yourself. It's kind of cool. They have big instructions printed up. And then there's a lock master at the other one. So another thing that you'll probably see is all those dips and spikes is there's going to be some pretty serious portages that are going to connect the different waterways. Some of them are pretty memorable. And I was telling Debbie and whoever else was on the Zoom earlier that I videoed myself on some of those portages, and there were some pretty foul words coming out of my mouth. So one of the most memorable, though, is right when you cross into Canada. So I think you'll see it in purple underneath Quebec. And it's called the Grand Portage. That's a 5.7-mile portage. And if you can see that little tiny spike underneath that purple Grand Portage, that is the 5.7 miles. So the first 2 miles, you go straight up 800 feet in elevation, which means you're pulling, your whole 100 pounds of gear behind you going up that. And then you descend at the apex, you descend down about 600 feet, which means you're holding on to your boat and your gear so that it doesn't go flying down the mountain. So the first time I did that portage at the beginning of the climb, I was bent so far forward as I was pulling my gear up that I looked down and saw my shadow, and it was literally touching my knee. My nose was touching my knee as I was pulling. I went, that's elevation for you. It was a pretty serious climb. And so again, each of those spikes and dips, they also cause a lot of technical and fast moving water. Those waterways, as they're dipping down, think rapids, lots of rapids, class 2, class 3, followed and before and after with lots of ripples, sometimes technical. The first year I did the trail, water was very low. So lowest it had been in 17 years. So I was navigating through boulders and boulder gardens right and left on the rapids. Then in 2019, the water levels were high, and it was a race. It was so fun. You just fly down those rapids. The other thing that goes with those dips and spikes is steep embankments, because there are dams and waterfalls all over the place. So you've got to go up those embankments and down those embankments. So again, going back to grueling portages, you use ropes I've heard of people using pulleys, but I think that's people that have a lot of gear. We tend to paddle light. So consequently, those grueling portages, another side effect of elevation is sore muscles, blistered, bruises, and you just beat the heck out of your gear. It's very hard on your bodies and your gear. Really, no matter how hard you train or how much you plan, you can depend on feeling hurt at the end of the day. So speaking of planning, or anybody, I think I will ask if anybody has any questions about that slide, or if we want to bring it up later, mention slide 2 and we'll bring it up if you have questions. Because to me, the elevation, it's so impressive. It's just, whoa, you did it. Somehow you got rid of the stuff. Cool. So yeah, the elevation was something I just didn't think about. I was thinking Michigan. I'm going from river to river to lake to lake. This is very, very different. So the next slide is to talk a little bit about our planning. So how we actually plan the trip. Most people go from that western terminus way over under the first segment, which is Old Forge, New York, and they paddle straight up and east to the eastern terminus in Fort Kent, Maine. There's a couple of different ways to paddle, and we choose to do what's called an integrated downstream paddle, or through hikers often call it a flip flop. So why we did that is, you see, we're going west to east the first 7 days, then we're going east to west the next 5 days. We're flip-flopping back and forth. And mainly that was to avoid one of those facts that was on that first slide, is that of that 740 miles, there's 150 miles of upstream paddling. And if you go west to east, you are having to paddle up rapids, like really high elevation rapids. So most people portage around those. And to avoid the portaging, we got to be in our boats. So when you see those flip-flops, we're basically trying to avoid 64 miles of upstream paddling on the Missisquoi, 34 miles on the Clyde, Little Spencer Stream. The first year I actually did go upstream on that. It was probably the worst part of my whole adventure. I mean, I love Spencer Stream. It was just so challenging. I was probably going a mile an hour on that stream walking up it. So being in our boats and getting to paddle on rapids and ripples downward was much better. So this is becoming a more popular way for people to do the trail. You're still going end to end in one expedition and solo, but you're not having to do that grueling upstream paddling. So the same template is really what helped us manage the rest of our planning. We could determine our section mileage, the 164 miles, 148 miles, how many days we were doing that. We could place, obviously, each time you see the arrows go a different way, we had to use shuttle cars. Those generally they were our own. The first year we actually found a guy that we paid $10 an hour to shuttle us here and there. That sounds like a lot, but it's not, because even though these seem like they're far apart paddling. Driving is not as far. So it also helped us figure out which cars we should have our resupply boxes in. And as you know, each shuttle car had our resupply boxes. It helped us detail out our daily paddle and portage miles, and we were very detailed. Matt put together an Excel spreadsheet that every single day showed what time we would start, what our put in was, what our takeout was, the town's contact information, if we were going to lodge in a tent or in an NFCT, a lodge, if we were going to stealth camp, if we were going to go into a town, pretty much what all our meals would be. Would breakfast, lunch, and dinner be on the trail, or would we be able to get into a town to get something to eat for one of those meals? So this was kind of like the Bible that got us started on the trip. From here, we were able to pretty much fill in all the details. Again, we can come back to that slide later if you want. So with that kind of high level stuff about the trail, I'm just going to go on to some of my personal stats, since I didn't really list much in my bio. I've completed the trail paddling solo in one expedition 2 years in a row. The first time was in 2018, and I did that in 32 and a half days. We planned for 30. But that was the year I think I mentioned that we had a 17-year low in the water, and that we got beat up on the rapids, and we had to portage a lot more than we thought. And we had some incredible storms. I mean, amazing storms where we were completely windbound. One of those was on an island called Hurricane Island, believe it or not. There were hurricane gale force winds that night when we hovered in our tents in the lightning post for hours. So that's why it was a little bit longer than we wanted. In 2019, we did it in 28.5 days. That means that I did sustain that 25 miles per day average, but it was not without testing my physical and psychological limits. Physically, for an old lady, 60 years old, with the first year I did it, it was tough, believe me. I was a desk junkie as a banker out in San Francisco for many years, so I wasn't really as fit as I thought I should be. But having said that, I'm living proof that you can do it and not be real physically fit, because what will get you through those grueling physical challenges, psychology, perspective, and attitude. I've had many, many people ask me what my most important piece of gear was, and I said, attitude. Always attitude, attitude, attitude. Doesn't matter what you have, what you lost, what broke, what works, what doesn't. If you got a bad attitude, you're not going any further. So I had a guy that I paddled with, Mac, that he's got a great attitude, and we both just rolled with all the challenges. So typically, most people can paddle as fast as they can walk. So for me, I'm short, I got short legs. That's about 3 miles per hour. So I can tell you, though, that average of 25 miles a day is not based on 3 miles an hour always, because sometimes when we were racing down those rapids, I'd look down at my Garmin and we were clocking 7, 8, 9 miles per hour. And then other times, if we had tailwinds, we actually brought sails, those big, I call them the Super Bowl sails. We put them on the front of our boats, and we could increase our speed by, 25% or more, sometimes way more than 3 miles an hour. But then there are other times where hitting some of those dips and spikes that you saw in the earlier graph, that we were walking up rapids, paddling into very strong headwinds where you didn't have any choice. You had to keep going. Navigating over beaver dams. The first year, because of the low water, I counted there were 42 beaver dams on the Clyde River. It was unbelievable. And some of those beaver dams were like waterfalls. You get up to them and you'd think the river would just be on the other side. It was like a 5-foot drop. So you have to get out and climb over them. And that really slows you down. And then, of course, the portages that I mentioned earlier. There's some very memorable ones. So the only other stat that I'll throw out there is my gear load. I know people seem to always be interested in the gear load. So the first year I paddled a 16-foot current design Squall GTS kayak, and that had a rudder on it. A lot of people, especially experienced canoeists, will say you don't need a rudder. Well, that's fine for the boundary waters, but when you're out in the middle of Lake Memphremagog and there's 5-foot waves with 3-foot swells, you want a rudder. That's the only way you can go straight. Or even the rapids, when you're trying to navigate around boulders, I'm telling you that in a big boat, you need a rudder. And living proof of that was the woman that went with us in 2019. She absolutely insisted she didn't need a rudder. And I can remember one time we were going across Moosehead Lake, and she, we're aiming to our point and our waypoint, and Mac and I are going straight to the waypoint with our rudders. We were paddling into side winds, and she was 2 miles blown off to the side. We actually had to go and rescue her to get her to come back, because without that rudder, she just couldn't keep her boat straight. And, a typical canoeist probably would have gotten windbound and gone to shore. But again, 25 miles a day, you just can't afford to stop at every time there's some wind or side winds or headwinds. So my gear load, or without the gear, that boat, that kayak, weighed 57 pounds. 57 pounds. Try carrying that over your head. My gear load on that first leg of that first trip was about 65 pounds. Call me a newbie, no judgment, please. Combined, I was managing 122 pounds of gear. And at that time, I didn't weigh much more than that. But by the end of that trail, that first year, I had dropped over 20 pounds of gear. Not to mention, I'd lost 20 pounds of body weight. So I dropped significantly. My second year, I was a little bit more experienced, and I learned a few lessons from that first expedition. I learned that instead of a kayak, I was going to go with a canoe. Number one, you can throw it over your head. Number two, you're sitting higher up in the water. Navigation is so much easier. I love my kayak. I was born and raised a kayaker, but I am now gone over to the dark side because the canoe is the way to go when you're hitting so many different kinds of water. So the canoe that I ended up with is I had a custom built Savage River loon. If you go out to their website, they actually call it a kayak, but it's a closed deck canoe. So it's open underneath. It doesn't have hatches, but I did have a rudder put on it. So that made the boat weigh around 32 pounds. That year, 2019, I shaved off 25 pounds just by changing boats. And then I dropped my gear load down from 65 to 45. So if you're doing the math here, I dropped 45 pounds of weight by just changing to a lighter boat and being more efficient and going more ultralight with my gear. I also lost 20 pounds of weight that year, but it was mostly because I contracted Giardia, otherwise known as beaver fever. If you've ever had it, you don't want it. It's horrible. I suffered severe intestinal problems the last 10 days of the trip. My paddling buddies, at least once a day for those 10 days, said, I think you need to quit. And I'm like, oh, no. You get so far. And at that point, we were already in the Allagash wilderness. And the only way to quit is to go to a ranger's office. And there weren't towns or hospitals or any services at all. It's like, I'll just paddle slower. And I went from probably on that waterway, you can easily be going 4.5 miles an hour. I dropped down to probably 2.5, just because I just didn't have the energy. I couldn't get the nutrition in me to keep up with what I needed. So it wasn't the best way to lighten my load, but I've learned. So I don't know where I am for time, Debbie, but if I haven't used it all up, I can either move on to questions or I can give you a few of my takeaways from my experiences. So these would be like my high level takeaways and people can ask questions about them. So I guess, go ahead.
Yeah, plenty of time here. So if people want to ask Maggie some questions, that would be great right now. And then if you want to do your takeaways, Maggie, then we can, people can ask some more questions or whatever. Oh, someone said takeaways.
Yeah, takeaways.
All right. Oh, okay. Yeah, let's do the takeaways and then we'll have questions.
And I think takeaways would allow you to ask questions too. So I'll just be high level about them. One of the biggest takeaways is in trying to lighten your load and be more efficient and effective. Almost all your gear can have multiple uses. I'll use my paint lines as an example. We had both bow and stern paint lines. I use those for lining, tracking, securing the boat. I also used it for clotheslines, hanging bear bags, and a throw line. I didn't need any of those extra things. The first year, I thought I needed one of each. A clothesline, a bear bag line. It's like, no, just use your paint lines for everything. I mentioned our sails earlier. We actually used those when we were portaging as umbrellas during heavy rainstorms because the water would just roll right over them. It was great. And then on a couple occasions, we would hang them upside down at night so that we could catch fresh rainwater for to filter the next day instead of having to, especially when we're portaging through woods. My PFD was a chair cushion on hard ground and a backrest in my tent. I didn't bring anything else, not any kayak cushion, nothing. That was the only thing I had. And of course, your PFD is one of the most important pieces of gear. Second takeaway, your body will burn calories like a furnace. I can talk about food and nutrition for hours, but the most important thing is that focus on high calorie, high carb, high fiber. I probably ate 5 times the amount of food I normally eat. No kidding. And I managed to lose weight. We go into a town, these little gas stations, and we order a whole extra large pizza and eat one each. And if they had cheeseburgers on a grill, we'd eat one of those too. And then we get back in our boats and keep paddling. During the day, I'd eat probably every hour, I'd eat something. So I'd eat dried fruit, nuts, jerky. There were a couple food bars I'd eat. I really don't like those high protein things. So mostly nuts, jerky, dried fruits. A lot of that I did myself. But I'd be lying if I didn't say that I didn't eat some Twizzlers. Twizzlers were a favorite amongst the group, and payday candy bars. Most people eat Snickers, but I didn't like the melty chocolate, so I did paydays. I felt like I was at least getting nuts in my body. Third takeaway, less is more, or as often as said, an ounce weighs a pound. You probably all know that if you're campers and hikers. But when you have a 32-pound boat over your top of your head with 45 pounds of gear on your body, and you're trying to figure out how to hold on to your cart, your portage cart at the same time, that's a lot. Weight, every ounce counts. It's like, just get rid of it, get rid of it, get rid of it. The last thing is pay attention and savor each moment. Every time I thought I couldn't go on, or I'd never see anything as incredible as that moose swimming right in front of me, or that eagle swooping down and pulling a salmon out of the river, every time, or it's bad or good, it changes. It always changes. So you just constantly have to pay attention. I can remember going down the Chase Rapids at Churchill Dam, right at the front end of the Allagash Wilderness, and I was petrified. It was the first time I'd ever done those rapids, and they're amazing. Most canoeists choose to have the rangers drive them around the rapids because they're too afraid, or they'll have them take all their gear out and cart that down to the end of the rapids. We chanced it and we said, no, we've got everything strapped down. But I remember when I met the rangers and they asked me, do you want your gear taken down? And I'm like, why? Why would I want to do that? And he says, well, it's just easier to rescue you. And I said, what am I doing? But being a smart girl, for those last 8 days, I brought a helmet, and my paddling buddy, he was hysterical because he doesn't do helmets or anything like that. And I had my helmet on, and he knew I was white knuckling it, and I was behind him the whole way, following his lines or picking my own. And we get to the bottom of the rapids, and I said, did you see that eagle that followed us all the way down? And he turned around and he looked at me and he says, how in the heck did you notice that eagle, as scared as you were? I said, because I pay attention and I savor each and every moment. So those would be my takeaways. And I can go on about gear or boats or anything else that you want to talk about, or just shut up.
Oh, no. So first we got a couple of questions here in the chat. So someone would like you to repeat what the name of the canoe, what was the name of the canoe you had built and the company?
Savage River is the company. They do a lot of racing boats. You'll see them in the big, like Missouri River 340, the MR 340. You'll see some Savage River racing boats. Even Campus to Coast, I see Savage River racing boats. But they'll do this again. If you look under SavageRiver.com, I think they have it listed under kayak. And generally along the trail, people would ask me all the time, what kind of kayak is that? It's really a closed deck canoe because it has no hatches at all. It's open just like the canoe, which, by the way, as far as efficiency goes, you definitely want a canoe. Now, that particular model is called the Loon, Loon. It's just lighter weight, smaller. They do make, I think they make an 18-footer or 17-footer. I probably should have gone with that, but my whole thing was about going lighter. And so I went a little bit smaller for the trail. I think a longer boat is better. And I've recently purchased for all of you and from Michigan and know anything about northern Michigan, the Cadillac area, there's a very famous paddler called Berlin Kruger. And a Kruger is it's like owning a vintage Mustang. They don't even make them anymore because Berlin Kruger has passed away, and the person he apprenticed to build the boats, I almost ordered one from him before I ordered the loon, but it took him like 6 months to build them, and I wanted it sooner. Mark, he passed away. So now you can't buy a Kruger. And I was able to find two last fall and purchased them both. And my friend bought one, and I'm very happy. I haven't even paddled it yet. I'm just sitting in my garage waiting, but it's a 17 footer. So the longer it is, the better. And the Savage River, if I were to do it again, I'd probably go with the longer one, but you're gaining a few pounds in weight. It's a great boat though. Great, great, great. I was nervous because it only has like 2 layers of Kevlar on the bottom. And I'm going to tell you some of those rapids. I'm like, I'm going to punch a hole in it. One of the things I added to my 45 pounds of gear was a big roll of Kevlar tape because I thought just in case, the kayak, you can't hurt, I had a GTS squall. I'm not going to hurt that. I bumped off rocks all the time, but only a couple layers of Kevlar, you can destroy that boat quickly. So I had to be a little bit more on my game with it.
All right, thank you. Okay, and the other question, one last question, Mary, and I'll get to you. It says, where do you live now? Do you train before you do these trips?
I live in Holland, Michigan. So I'm on the west side of the state. I grew up on the east side in Howell, Michigan, over there, Livingston County. Know Ann Arbor very, very well, and a lot of those areas around there. I just love that whole east side. But when I moved out to California for many years, and after I retired, somehow I ended back up over on the west coast, and I'm very happy. I train in the Saugatuck Dunes, which is a big set of sand dunes that have miles and miles of hiking trails along the lake or in the woods there. And I'll put on start with like a 15-pound pack, and I'll work up to a 40-pound pack that I'll carry up and down the dunes for training all winter long. I'll put my ice cleats on. I also paddle button boat training. Usually by now I would have already been paddling for a month because I'm not doing the trail this year. I may do a section or two of it, but I'm not going to do the whole trail. The whole COVID thing has me a little, anxious. So I would probably be out on the Kalamazoo River right now every single day, paddling 20 to 25 miles for training purposes. I'll also do the Campus to Coast is a great shakedown. It's I don't think they're holding it this year again. Last year they didn't either. But if you're ever thinking of doing something aggressive like the Northern Forest Canoe Trail, or really any paddling where endurance is an issue, I would go do the Campus to Coast, because you don't have to finish it in 57 hours, but to get, say you completed it, you're supposed to do 153 miles in 57 hours. The young college kids, they got 3 guys in a canoe and they'll finish it in like 24 hours. I finished it, and I think we came in like an hour under deadline. But the first year I got hypothermia from the cold. The ground was frozen. That's one of the reasons why it's one of the top 10 hardest races, because it's in a cold time of year. You have to wear a wetsuit, or not a wetsuit. I wore a dry suit the whole time. You're camping on snow. The portages are very hard. Well, I thought they were very hard until I did the Northern Forest Canoe Trail, but they're a good staging thing to learn how to do that more grueling portages on the trail. So yeah, that would be my training regimen. There's also a set of steps down here in Saugatuck that go up to the top of this huge sand dune. It's 380 steps, and I'll put a pack on again and just go up the steps, hike around the dunes, come back, go down the steps with the pack on, drop the pack off, hike some more, put the pack back on, go up the steps. That's a really good training thing for my core. That's about it. I don't go to the gym. I'm lazy about weights and things like that. Sometimes I just put all the weight, like when I do the Kalamazoo River, I'll not have anybody shuttle me. I'll leave my car way up in Allegan Dam, and then I'll paddle down. I'll put my wheels on my boat, have it fully loaded like I would if I was on the trail, And then I pull it the 5.7 miles or 8 miles or whatever I'm doing that day on the road, just so I can get used to pulling all that weight behind me. That's how I train. Pretty simple stuff.
All right. Thank you. Okay, Mary, you had a question?
Well, I'm very interested in your cart, your canoe cart.
Yeah, the carts are one of your biggest fails. We both purchased the Seattle Sports Paddleboy, and it's a great cart, but it weighs, I think, out of the box, almost 16 pounds. So
Wow.
back to how important weight is. The first year we jerry-rigged it. We cut things off of it and trimmed it down and trimmed it down. I got it down to both of us got it down to about 13 pounds. But the problem with that was it also caused some structural integrity. But it doesn't matter. Your carts, what you need to know about carts is make sure you have spare wheels. Because the wheels are the biggest thing, and to always get a cart that has wheels that have bearings in it. The first year I destroyed my cart completely. We shot all the bearings. We couldn't find anybody to fix it. Again, you're in small towns. There's just, even bicycle shops don't have the right stuff often. So I just had to put that one in the car and go buy like whatever we could find at a local supplier. And it was one of those with the big red tires and the pin in the tire. So it's just, a rod going through it. And I couldn't figure out what was wrong. I thought I was dying. I'm like, why is this boat so heavy? Then I realized what bearings mean. Take some of the weight off. So, and it spins the wheels. So I would not get one of those cheap carts. I would go all out. And if you're interested, I can have Debbie post my email address, because I have a couple websites, both the Seattle Sports and then a new one I'm trying out. It hasn't even been delivered yet, but it's a little less heavier, and I don't think I'll have to jerry rig it. It's not a steel frame though, it's an aluminum frame. But my friend in 2019, he's an 80-year-old gentleman. He came with us for the first 8 days of the trip. He had a Kruger Monarch, which probably weighs 65 pounds. And I swear to God, that guy had 100 pounds of gear in that boat. And he would throw that thing on this cart. It's called paddle cart. And I'd never even heard of him. He could pull that thing over rocks and everything. Now, he didn't do the whole trail with us, though, so I can't say it's been tested for the whole length. But I'll say that it appears to be very sturdy. And both Mac and I ordered one of those carts. So carts, you got to have parts. You got to have duct tape. You got to have, we did everything. Even at one point when all Mac's tires blew out, he actually took his bandana and wrapped it around like a tourniquet, because the tube completely blew out. We were pulling up a mountain at that point. You have to get creative. You have to be prepared to stop and do repairs, carry as many spare parts as you can afford to, with weight. Like I say, duct tape. When the second year, we were in Canada, in Quebec, Mansonville, Quebec, and my cart, again, completely, the frame just collapsed. So I had to rebuild the frame. And it was, we used shelf brackets. Two French guys came out, took us in the back. They found heavy, thick styrofoam brackets, duct tape, zip ties. Very creative. I'm not kidding. If I showed you the picture of the original cart compared to what I came home with, y'all would laugh. But it made it the rest of the trail. And the coolest thing was, because it was styrofoam for the top of the frame, it floated. So carts, we could go on for hours about carts. So I guess my piece of advice to everybody that asks is make sure you have spare tires somewhere. If you've got a shuttle car, or if you're shipping resupply boxes, or call ahead to the hardware stores or bike shops, if you can find one and say, hold one for me, because I might need it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So we have a question in the chat. It says water treatment. How did it fail? You were speaking of, your giardia, whatever you got.
Oh, my
on
water,
one.
yeah, water treatment did not fail. I am a belt and suspenders kind of girl. I actually will filter water and boil it. And I use the, your classic, right now the name is eluding me, but it's the basic one where you put it into the pouch and it drains through, and it's excellent. And then I boil a lot of my water. But I know the moment I made my mistake, we'd gone over multiple beaver dams I think we were on the Norwegian at the time, and you climb out of your boat, you're stepping into these beaver dams. I had on shorts, a t-shirt, and no gloves. And, I got poison ivy too at the same time, because they drag everything into those beaver dams, right? And I remember we had gone over 3 incredibly hard. They were like each one was a separate portage practically, but you're climbing over them, then you're dropping your boat down these waterfalls. And the third one, I was way ahead of my 2 paddling partners. And I thought, okay, I have a little bit of time to grab something to eat. And I grabbed a food bar, you rip it with your teeth and then you hold onto the wrapper. Well, it fell out of the wrapper. And I was so freaking hungry that I just grabbed that thing with my bare hand and shoved it in my mouth and licked the chocolate off my hands. Yeah. Don't do that. Because I'm so careful. I'm just so obnoxiously careful. But yeah, I tracked it back, and it was exactly that day and that moment. So be careful what you do. I know another person that got giardia because, they filter their water, they boiled the water, but then they went down to the river to wash out their cup and their spork. No, don't do that. Boil the water and, then clean your spork and whatever. So, and really, if you're careful, you're not having to filter too much. There's artisans along the way. There's a lot of opportunities to pull into towns, or there's trail angels that will have bottles of water like they do along the Appalachian Trail. But you're filtering enough, so make sure. I also have the little drops. The rangers all use bleach, believe it or not. That's the thing. They all carry little tiny bottles of bleach, and they'll just put a drop or 2 of bleach in their water. I don't happen to like the taste of bleach, but I did have the little drops that, like the iodine type drops too, that on occasion when it was really bad, because remember, you're going, some of this territory, it's farm territory, and there's manure runoff and all the toxins from the cattle farms. You don't even ever want to drink that water. But if you had to, you definitely want to, boil it, drops, everything. So that's my water treatment story.
Thank you. All right, Mike.
I was going to ask another cart question. I couldn't see the wheels being used going over a beaver dam, but I was wondering how much you actually use them. I mean, you may be going along paved stuff somewhere along the line, but
you use your carts. Well, it depends on who you are. A true canoeist will say, I never use a cart. I throw the boat over my head. Well, there's at least one 20-mile portage on paved roads. There's the 5.7 Grand Portage I was telling you about. That's on a paved mountain roads, but still paved. There's an 8-mile portage, back roads. There's gravel roads, dirt roads, logging trails. Some of these trails are unbelievable. If anybody's ever interested, send pictures or put something together. They're just rocks. And the taller the tires, by the way, the better, because it allows you to navigate over the rocks. I always pretended when I was portaging like I was going down rapids, because I would go over the rocks and between the rocks. I had my portage cart on almost every portage. I only carried my boat maybe 3 or 4 times. That's another reason why I beat the heck out of my cart, though. So some of the guys that do the trail in like 23, 24 days, they throw their boat over their head and they'll walk that 5 miles with it over their head. That's just not me. So I do use my cart a lot. And pretty much all the people I've paddled with use their carts a lot. So yeah, have a good cart, have good wheels. I liked the taller wheels. My friend Mac had the same tubes with bearings, but they were a little bit shorter. I think his were 12, mine were 16. I could navigate the really boulder, rock strewn trails much better than he could. My boat would just go right over the top of them. So carts are important. This isn't the boundary waters.
All right. We have another question. It says, was the second trip substantially more enjoyable given how much lighter your load was?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's kind of hard to say. Like Mac's done the trail now 5 times, and he says every time it's amazing because weather changes, water levels change. It's just so different, but enjoyable. The first time is the most important. It's amazing. It's like the first time you paddle, the whole Manistee or something. It's incredible. You'll never forget it. So it was more challenging. I was able to overcome so many obstacles that I didn't think I could. So to me, the first time was probably the most important and the best time. But was it easier the second time? Absolutely. The canoe made it the easiest. I mean, I just couldn't believe the difference. I could stand up in my canoe in the middle of a river. It's hard to do that in a kayak. I could go to the bathroom in my canoe while I'm paddling down the river because you can squat, you can lay back, you can do, I had a huge opening. I could sleep inside my canoe. Mac in his Kruger, he actually puts a tent over the top of it. He sleeps at night inside of it. A canoe, when I was in my kayak and put my hands in the water, it might come up to between my wrist and my elbow. In any river, you just put your hands in the water along the boat. In the canoe, my fingers don't touch the water. So that shows you that how many things you're avoiding, rocks, trees, logs, that you can just go over the top of. Because I would watch Mac in his canoe go over the top of a log, and I was in my kayak going, oh, I can do that. Bam! I'd be hung up on a log because the kayak sits so low in the water. So yes, canoe made it so much easier. Some of my gear choices, I just got better about and more efficient with that. I knew what to bring. Of course, being sick the last 10 days did not help, but yeah, it did make it easier, much easier. And I knew what to expect too. I'm a highly anxious person. And, when I would hear rapids the first year, you can hear them, roaring away in the front of you. And you're just like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. And you start that whole plan B, plan C. How am I going to get through this? And the second year, it was interesting watching my friend Darlene that came with us the whole trail. She was in my seat, she's like, oh my God. And I'm like, it's nothing. So yeah, it was easier in that sense too.
All right. And then another question was, what was the cost of the canoe, if you can share that?
I think because I had it specifically built for me, because I had the coping a little different and the opening a little bit different. I'm going to say it was around $4,000 for everything. Now, you can get closed deck canoes that are similar to a Savage River for cheaper, believe me. And if people are interested in different kinds, I'm now sold on closed deck canoe. I don't want anything other than that. The skirts, are Mac and I never would wet inside our boat. We'd never had water inside our boat unless we didn't put our skirt on. The woman that had the Bell Wildfire canoe, and she had one of those big covers that you snap on, it was always wet inside there. She was, putting water out all the time. Closed decks are the best. Your gear stays dry. So I think it's worth the expense, but Savage River is a little pricey, but there's other ones out there, believe me.
All right. Any other questions for Maggie? Oh, here's one. It says, did you fall out of your canoe during the rapids or other close calls? Did you have any other close calls or incidences?
The first year, because of the low water, I tipped twice in the rapids, the Saranac Rapids. That's about 6 miles of ripples and rapids, and my boat was just bouncing off of rocks right and left. Again, because I'm in a kayak, I'm sitting so low in the water, and I'm trying to follow my friend's lines in front of me, but he's in a canoe. And again, I didn't understand because I wasn't a canoer. And so I'm like, oh, I'll just take the same line he is. And so, yeah, I tipped a couple. I remember the first time I had hit so many rocks that I just went, get it over with, just get it over. And I literally turned sideways, jumped out of the boat. It was only like, not above my ankle deep water, but it's moving really fast. And Mac just yelled back. He said, let go of your boat now. And I just let go of it, let it fly down the rapids. It got caught up in an eddy. He retrieved it. I, carefully ferried my body over to the side of the river. So never got hurt or anything like that. Close calls, they were really more of a group thing. I mean, there were times you're out in the middle of a massive lake, obviously not as big as our lakes here, but you're trying to get from point A to point B. So you want to do the straight line. Sometimes that's the longest crossing. And, you're sitting in waves that are so, I can't even see the boat in front of me. It just disappeared. And that was kind of scary. The last day of the first year I did, the very last day, we headed out of Allagash Village, and the fog was so thick. Mac's kayak had one of those bicycle flags on it with the orange flag, so that when I was following his lines down the rapids, I could just see that flag no matter what. But I couldn't see anything. And you really couldn't see the hand in front of your face. We knew that it was crazy, but we also wanted to make our time at that point. It was like, we only have half a day. Let's just go out there. And Matt kind of knew that river well enough. So that was a little scary. But as far as other jumps, no, we always managed to stay afloat somehow. We just did. I got stuck on top of a lot of logs that first year. The canoe went over everything. Never got stuck. Never got stuck on a rock or a log. The kayak, yeah. It could be just the fact that it's so low in the water. Also could be that year there was also very low water. So no real scary thing. Now, having said that, the gentleman I talked about before that did the first 8 days with us, the Saranac Rapids in 2019, the water level was extremely high. The rapids were moving at a pace that were just unbelievable. And Mac and I knew that the two people that were with us didn't have as much experience. And I don't have a lot of experience on rapids, but they didn't even have as much as I did. And so I don't know what happened. All I know is he tipped, and it was really a treacherous point. The river was so wide, and fortunately, he kept his wits, and he was in a Kruger canoe. It flipped over. It guided him down the river. It just followed the lines. The boat did, and he hung on behind it. And then when we headed into the town of Saranac, he saw the big cement bridge and the viaduct, and he just let go of the boat and got ferried himself over to shore because he didn't want to hit that cement piling. And the boat made it through without a scratch. He did lose a paddle and some stuff. He got a little banged up, but nothing. I mean, he was bouncing over rocks. But they had the rescue mission, the people common police, and it was crazy. We didn't even know it, but we were on national news. And after that was his last day, unfortunately. And after we left him and got ourselves together and got back on the trail, we pulled into some small town. I think it was like a McDonald's. We were pulling our boat through the town, and we all parked our boats out in front of a McDonald's, went inside, and everybody went, "You're them, you're the people." So that was the biggest accident, or I guess challenging thing that ever happened, but that was it. I mean, children ride with their parents. There's the youngest kid I think that's done the trail is 5 years old, rode in a canoe with his parents. So you're careful, safety first. There's a couple times where Mac chose to paddle some rapids, and we scouted them. We walked along them. I went, no way in hell, I am not doing those. Especially when they have ledges and stuff, makes me very nervous. So even with the kayak, I was like, nope, not doing it. And I just choose to walk 4 miles, along the road, and then I'd meet them. And almost inevitably every time we get there at the same time. You know, it's just because I could walk as fast as he could paddle, even on rapids, because you're being very careful. So you always put safety first, and you don't do anything that you're not comfortable with. You portage about, they say there's 70 miles, 70 plus miles of portaging. I think the first year I did over 100. The second year we did over 120. There were a couple times, and you don't have to do all those portages. It's just a lot of people will stop if they're windbound and camp. We didn't. We just portaged through it. So if Lake Champlain was windbound, the second half of it, we portaged 20 miles to get around it. We went over the bridge, the international. We did all that stuff because it's just as easy to pull your boat. You know, you can do 3 miles an hour either way, and you're safer. So I think the biggest thing is just be real safe.
How was international travel?
Oh, that's interesting. Now, I couldn't say this on the last time I did a presentation because I had a whole bunch of Northern Forest Canoe Trail people on the phone. But the first year, they'd closed down the international bridge on the Richford, New Hampshire side. So we were coming back in to New Hampshire. So we went up through Lake Memphremagog, up into Quebec, and then did the Grand Portage, spent the night, came down, and we're headed to the international bridge, and they said it's closed. We'd heard that it was supposed to be open, but there was no signs. Like here in Michigan, when they're working on a bridge, they hang all that stuff and put the orange stuff and signs everywhere. There was nothing. So we knew that it was supposed to be closed. We really did. But the portage around was a 20-mile portage. So we would have to pull our boats off the water and then do 20 miles around the bridge to get back into New Hampshire. And we said, well, let's just see what's up there. It might be open. You don't have any internet or anything. So we get to the border. There's the customs, the US, there's nobody there. And there's a few people working up at the top of the bridge, but no sign. So we thought, let's just go through. So there's nothing to stop you. So we started racing, and it's rapids. We're racing down these rapids. And all of a sudden, this guy from up on the bridge starts screaming at us saying, you can't do that. You can't do that. You're going to get arrested. We're like, what do you mean? We can't stop. We're on rapids. And we're yelling to this guy. He eventually sends a squad car down along the river. And this guy in Rambo clothing comes running down from US Customs. And he pulls us off the water and literally makes us tie our boats up, walk up this steep embankment, takes us to the customs office. They were going to arrest us. I felt like, it was Arlo Guthrie, Alice's restaurant. It was like, are you kidding me? You have no signage. And then finally they admitted it. All the signage is on the roads. I'm like, what about boats? Makes you think we would see the signs on the roads. So really what they're watching for is, I guess there's a lot of smugglers that bring stuff from Canada into the US via boats. So they searched all our boats, took everything apart, my stove, food bags, everything, because they're looking for drugs and fishing lures and gear. If you don't have a license, then they can nab you. But they let us go with a warning. Our names are now in the database. So I would say that the coming into the US is a pain in the butt. And everybody you talk to that's done the NFCT, or also some of my ice climbing friends or rock climbing friends, always say coming back in is the problem. Going across into Canada, you paddle up to this big house along the big Lake Memphremagog. You go up, you pick up a phone. It's not manned at all. You dial in, you give them your passport information, you tell them where you're going and when you're leaving. That's it. That's all you do. The US, oh my gosh, it's crazy. Yeah. So it's interesting. They have an app now, I guess, that you can go on that'll allow you to get through quicker if you're a paddler. We tried it, it didn't work. But I'm hearing that that's improved, but now you can't go across the border at all right now. So even if you were doing the Northern Forest Canoe Trail, there is no way to get up into Canada, but they're giving you full credit even if you skip that section because we can't cross the border. But
They
Go ahead.
supposedly have an app for the Great Lakes as well.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Lake Erie for sure, and it was supposed to go up to Huron, and I know it's not a Great Lake, but Lake St. Clair as well. Last time I talked to somebody.
Oh, cool. Well, I hope it works better than theirs did. But again, that was 2 years ago. Maybe it's improved. Maybe now that they've had nobody crossing. So the section that you paddle into in Canada, the people are just awesome. Mansonville is I actually want to drive up into Canada just to stop in that town driving because the people are those the guys at the hardware store that spent hours helping me rebuild my car, charge me nothing. They're like, no. This is like, because they got everything from the scrap heap or whatever. But the Canadians are great, friendly. I made sure ahead of time, though, my cell had international coverage just in case we got stranded over there. Both of us did that. And you have to download, if you use a Garmin or something, you want to make sure that you have the international maps too. Because the first year I didn't do that on my Garmin, and we were going down the Allagash into the St. John, and all this, and there's places as you're winding onto the St. John that it's braiding, the river's braiding, and all of a sudden I looked at my Garmin and I'm like, where are we? I mean, it was just dark space. And Mac looked down at his and he says, oh my God, we're in Canadian territory. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to stay on the American side, but the braids are so confusing. So we quickly zipped over. The next year I made sure I had the international chip for my Garmin.
All right. We have a couple other questions here. It says, did you take camera gear with you or did you just rely on your cell phone for a camera?
I only relied the first year, that first leg of the trip, when I talked about dumping off 20 pounds, I did have a little Fuji camera thinking, oh, this will be great because it does much better videos and stuff, but I got rid of that very quickly. Yeah, that's one of the first things I got rid of. You don't have time to stop like that. If you can get your iPhone out and click stuff, that's great. But you're not gonna. Darlene in 2019, she's a camera bug and she loves to take all kinds. She's got the big fancy camera and stuff. And I said, yeah, go ahead and take it, but be prepared. I said, I'm gonna put money down right now. You will never take that out. And she never did. The first leg of the trip, she stowed it in the car, which isn't a real safe thing to do because it was a very expensive camera, but you just don't have time. If you're doing it in 50 or 60 days, like I'd love to do the trail again and just take 50 days. I have a friend that's doing it right now and she's going to take at least 50 days. Then yes, bring your gear, but be prepared because it's weight. So, and it's something else you have to worry about getting wet, stolen. So that's why my cell phone, I've got incredible between Mac and I, the pictures, videos, cell phones now do everything. So I find that I have an iPhone. It did excellent pictures and excellent videos. I wouldn't bring a camera, even if I had the time, but if I was taking 50, 60 days and I was a camera buff, yeah, maybe I'd do it.
Okay. And here's the another question was, what was the typical air temperature and were you hot or comfortable most of the time?
Again, depends on this year. So we left both times first week of June and ended the first week of July. The temperatures could be, there was one night towards the end of June that the first year that I was so cold that I took everything out of my portage bag and stuffed my feet inside it, inside my sleeping bag, inside my tent. I was so cold. And I had goose down booties, I had goose down sleeping pants and a goose down jacket and a goose down sleeping bag. I was so cold. Mac was just shivering over in his tent. I could hear him because he didn't have as good a sleeping bag as I did. But it can be very, very cold and it can be very hot. It's the Northeast, it's sort of like the Northwest US. You just don't know. There's mountains all around you. The bugs in 2019 were unbelievably bad, unbelievable. I don't know why, but they were just horrific. The first year I never even had a black fly bite or a mosquito bite because it was very temperate. A lot of rain that year, but not a lot of bugs. And 2019, not as much rain, but I couldn't believe the bugs. I looked like I had leprosy, and top to bottom, I was just eaten alive. And you can't permethrin or bug dope or wear enough headgear. But I had full, I'd have gloves on, dry pants on, and hot weather just to keep the bugs off of me. Unbelievable. You'd pick up your coffee cup in the morning. After you'd make it in your tent, you'd step outside the tent, and there'd be 10 bugs in there immediately. It was like, okay, just scrape those suckers off. So weather, very unpredictable. Another reason why I like the flip-flop style or method of paddling is when you do it the other way, you go straight through, you have the gear you have. You can have some stuff sent for resupply, but you're lucky if you get it. And if you do, then what do you do with it? Say you say, oh, I'm going to switch from a heavy sleeping bag to a light. What do you do with it? With the shuttle cars, I had an extra sleeping bag. I had an extra pair of dry pants, an extra dry top, extra wheels for my cart. I was prepared for weather changes. I had shorts and t-shirts and things. So yeah, be prepared for anything. Most important, I don't care if it was 93 degrees out and humid as heck, I'd have my dry pants and my dry top on. Not dry top, but one of the NRS, like the paddle jacket with the hood, that it has the, Velcro sleeves and Velcro around the waist, or I'd tuck it into my dry pants because you're out on big lakes in a canoe, even in a kayak, you can tip over so easily. And the water is like Lake Superior. And Lake Champlain, it's like Lake Superior. It's just freezing cold. Some of the rivers, it's freezing cold. So we were in paddle pants a lot. So you just deal with the weather. You don't really notice it. I can't say that I was uncomfortable other than 2019, the bug bites. But my whole thing about the bug bites was, I think it all started when I got the Giardia. I think my system changed, and it was lowering my immunity to things. So that's when the bugs got the worst for me. Prior to that, you just deal with the weather. You be prepared, like Michigan, layers. You don't take too many clothes, but you take enough that you can be prepared.
All right. Anybody else have a question? Any questions for Maggie? Yeah, I agree. That was wonderful.
Thank you. It was fun.
Yes.
So let's see, what time are we in?
Yeah, we have 8:22. So
okay.
yeah, no, that was thank you so much, Maggie. That was great. And yes, we definitely would I would, if you're okay with that, share, if you're okay with sharing, like you said, that like you had a website link or something, and I can send that out to the group.
Yes.
We'll get together afterwards. And
trail. And then on the last presentation, we did that slide that shows how we broke up the trail. I have that in a PDF I can send to you to post to your group. Do you guys have like a share space or anything?
Yeah, we've got Google groups that I can send that out to people. Or
and then the other thing I can send you is the spreadsheet that Mac did, because he cleaned it up and took all our personal information off of it so it could share it with other people. It's a nice, great template. And then if people have questions about gear or anything, I can literally, the first time I met Mac was through a kayak club on the west side of the state. And I think I paddled, he pushed me to do the long distance paddling, and he got me to do 20 miles in one day. The whole time, all we talked about was gear. So every time I paddled with this guy, all I talked about was gear. And I remember my sister saying, is this guy married? Does he have children? What does he do? And I said, I have no idea, and I don't care. We talk about gear. I love talking about gear. That's my favorite thing. So if people have questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
And you. Pleasure. And I can't wait to come
Thank you.
again.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of thank yous. Great presentation.
Yeah.
Station. Love your attitude. Thanks for sharing. Wonderful. Thank you.
Great. Well,
All
thank you
right.
for having me. It was a pleasure.
Oh, yeah. Well, I sure appreciate you spending your time with us so much.
The
All
great,
right.
You guys have a great club.
Thanks.
Okay.
All right. Well, if
you so
that's
much.
it. Yeah, if that's it, we're gonna go ahead and close the meeting unless someone else has anything else to bring up concerning the club. And if not, just as a reminder, I will be sending the updates for the election as things are solidified for that. And good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. And we will see you in May for the next general membership meeting. You'll see the emails come out, but it is the next general membership meeting is May 25th. All right. Good night, everyone.
Nice to see some of you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Hey,
Debbie, you
ma'am.
wanted to say something?
Who?
Debbie?
Did I?
Yes.
Oh, well, it was just concerning, it was more private than
Oh.
anything. So